Hi, I hope you are all doing well. I wanted to chat about Cuddle quilts in this video. As you can see, I have two quilts on my wall and one of them is pretty wild. I am part of a group that makes Cuddle quilts which go to certain charities, hospitals, etc. To people to use them as comfort items. I'm on the making side of it, so I'm given a pack of pre-cut fabric, instructions, cut binding, and batting, and then I go to work. I found Cuddle quilts after listening to an amazing podcast called Canada's Forgotten Quilts, where the speaker found a quilt that had a handwritten label on it. They tracked it down to a church in Canada and found out that it was part of a volunteer effort led by the Red Cross to make comfort items sent mainly to Britain during the Second World War to help those who had lost their homes. It interviews people who lost their possessions, homes, and families and share how these quilts, now mainly gone, used to threads, helped others. I have this podcast linked below and encourage you to listen to it and or send it to someone who would love to hear about quilt history. After this podcast, I looked up different quilt groups in my area and found this program, which I'm very happy to participate in. As I mentioned before, I'm given these quilt packs to make. The pattern and the fabric is all picked out, so all I have to do is piece them together, sew, and quilt. This is a yellow and blue-ish checkerboard quilt made up of some really fun and interesting and questionable fabric. It's definitely not something I would pick out to make, but I think someone will really enjoy how cheerful and interesting this is. And it's really fun to step out of my comfort zone. I'm gonna have fun quilting it on my machine and trying to pick out a fun pattern for the recipient. Sometimes I just like to sit and sew and not have to wrestle with too many decisions within a project, so while piecing in general can feel tedious to me, I like that these fabrics and projects are completely unknown. The fabric is given to me in piles, so I never know what will show up next. And now the top is done. It's backed onto my wall for now while I switch to the next project. Okay, up next is a Ruffle bag that is a free pattern from We Are the Fabric Store, which is a company from New Zealand. They put this out on their blog, so if you're looking for it, either check my links below or it's within their blog. It was kind of tough for me to find. I found out about this project through one of my favorite podcasts, which I will also link. It's the Love to Sew bonus episodes. So we will put this together. This is how they made it. I'm using a canvas here. The ruffle is a little bit shorter because something happened with my measurements, and it's usually a bit wider, which you will see at the end of the new project. And I'm going to do a Valentine spin on this and use a heart block. This is a free pattern also from Cluck Cluck Sew, also linked below, and we will do a heart pattern on one side of it. I didn't realize how easy a heart block was to put together until I actually looked it up, and it's so interesting. This is what I love about quilting. It's just putting squares on squares and sewing diagonally. It's all math, so this is really fun for me to do and me to learn. I didn't practice the heart quilt part of this, a heart block part of this, so you will see that I make a couple mistakes. Actually, I make a lot of mistakes in this video. So I will point those out when they come up. To mark the squares diagonally, I wanted to use a bone folder, but on this dark fabric, I just couldn't see the creases, so I had to resort to one of my pens. So this was a learning experience for me. I didn't realize that the bone folder wouldn't work on everything. So I did that, and we are sewing up the bottom points. This fabric I'm using is directional, so there's one way that it can be. There's one way that the flowers are going, so I was really careful to make sure that I'm putting them the way I want to. And now I will press it open and see how nice this looks. And that's the bottom of the heart. Now for the top, so we do the same thing in miniature versions. We do 4 squares on the top, on each corner. First, I'm going to cut off the excess corners behind the bottom squares. And now ready for the top. We're going to mark these again with the pen and then sew them together. The squares are so little and the print doesn't show that much, so I'm trying to make sure that it is in the same direction, but I don't really think it matters too much. I went to pin this together, but the squares are so small that I ended up using glue. Pins will just move everything around, and the clips are just way too heavy and way too big for this use. So I saw someone online somewhere using glue when they have something that's a little bit finicky, and so that's what I decided to use here on these squares. Okay, it is all sewn together, and now I'm just going to sew up the center seam here to complete the heart. And voila, it looks so pretty. In hindsight, I think I would have used different fabric that was a little bit more contrasting. I feel like I should have used like a lighter one. I thought it was going to work out a little bit better and the heart would be easier to notice, but it's okay. I still really like this. So now I'm trying to decide on the placement of the heart. So I have to build up a block the other side of the bag. So I'm going to add fabric to the top and bottom and to the sides. So you can do the sides first or the top and bottom first, but so after you sew this together, then you true it up and you trim the sides off. So I'm truing up with the inside seam so that everything stays straight, so the inside seam of the heart. And yeah, I trim each side with my ruler. So I am gonna sew up the sides here, and I went to check to make sure I had enough fabric, and I did not. So I have to get some more fabric and redo the top part of it. Learn from my mistakes. I'll have the measurements of everything that would fit on this bag on the screen here. So now we have the right amount of fabric, and I'm going to trim the top. And I'm going to trim the bottom. And now I'm double checking with my template, and it fits. Thank goodness, like just fits. It should be a little bit bigger than that. I have the correct measurements on this screen for you. Now I am going to cut it out using pins and my rotary cutter. You can use just normal sewing scissors for this too. It's sometimes a bit tough to do little corners like you see in the up there at the top. I did mention this before, but once you cut out the pattern, make sure that you have your marks on. I had to remark mine again because the fabric is so dark and because I kept ironing everything and they're heat pens. So, just make sure you keep the pattern pieces nearby if you ever have to remark. Okay, and we are all done cutting it, and the heart is at the bottom of the template. So I'm really happy about that. And now next we do the ruffle. So we fold it in half and then we sew up just the short sides first. I'm going to press it to make the sewing a little bit easier because I won't use pins for this part. So this is a big mistake that I didn't show on here. So here you'll see that I'm putting a new yellow thread in the bobbin, and that's not the mistake part, but I just wanted to mention this as we are going along, that when you are doing a ruffle you need to pull on the bobbin threads, and so if you have a contrasting color it's easier to find and it's easier to remove at the end of this. So to make a ruffle, if you don't know, you use very long stitch length and then you do 2 rows in a line on one end of the ruffle. So you'll see me do that. And then at the end, you pull the bobbin threads. So what I did, my cheater way, which is one of my bad habits, is I only did 1 line and then my thread broke, of course. So they tell you to do 2 lines so that doesn't happen. So here I am doing 2 lines. I am using a different bobbin thread and I'm finally doing it properly. So learn from my mistakes. Don't do it like I do. Do it as all the professionals the years ahead of me have advised you to do. Gathering isn't my favorite thing to do when sewing, but I find it's easier the longer the stitch length I use, so I have mine set at 5 here. Again, sew 2 rows of these on one side of the long edge for the ruffle. Okay, we have everything sewn up, and now I'm going to gather it, and it's supposed to be the length of the curve underneath here, so I'm just going to pull on my yellow threads now that I can see them, and I'm just going to gather. They use a lot of fabric for this ruffle, so it is a pretty tight ruffle. You can use, like, they have a suggested length for this. You can use it less or longer. I wouldn't use canvas or thick fabric to do this because it's a little bit too bulky and a little bit too difficult to pull together, and that will definitely make your threads break. But yeah, this is a really ruffly ruffle for this project, and it ends up so pretty. I really like it. I think they did a great job with what they use. But again, if you don't have enough fabric to make the length of the ruffle that they suggested, you could always make it a little shorter. It's not a big deal. I like to pull at both ends to make the job a little bit easier, and yeah, it was a little bit faster using the longer stitch length. So now I'm going to compare it, and I'm going to fit everything where they are on the curve, and then I'm going to pin it. I'm just double checking where the ruffle is on this because they don't really say specifically where to start the ruffle. It's below the second mark on this side where the drawstring is supposed to go, but you can play around with how you like it to look. This is a great use case for clips because it is so thick with the ruffles, so I find clips are a little bit easier to use. This was a really satisfying part to do, putting the ruffle on. And then the part that is next, I basted it. So I go back to the machine, use the same stitch length and thread, and I will sew it together, and then I will sandwich the other side of the bag to it. They don't do that in the instructions from the fabric store, but I find that it's much easier and less stressful, and you get a better ruffle by doing this extra step. It is more thread to pull out at the end, but I think it's worth it for how it looks. Okay, now we tuck the ruffles back in and then we reclip it right sides together and we sew that back up. This is where you sew. Again, they don't really tell you where to sew from. So you sew from the markings. So there's 2 drawstring markings on the bag. There's a top and a bottom one. So I would sew from the bottom one to the bottom one on the other side. It looks like in the pictures that they just sewed the ruffle together. So that's why it's a little bit confusing, but to the drawstring at one point anyway. So you may as well do it now. And now we turn it around and it looks so good. Off camera, I took about 10 minutes to remove all the threads from all the basting that I did, but it looks so nice. Isn't that a nice ruffle? I really like this pattern. Next is the pocket. So we're going to if you have a serger, use a serger, but otherwise use a zigzag stitch on the sides and sew each side of them up. This size of pocket is a little bit questionable to me. My daughter says that she wants one of these for her gym bag, but she wants a big enough pocket for her brush. This pocket is big enough for like a lip balm. Like, it's not too functional, but it is really nice to have a pocket. I would make it bigger for my use, so just to let you know, you might want to make your pocket a bit bigger. So I forgot to record this part, but what you do is you turn under each side of the pocket 1 centimeter, and then the top part 2 centimeters, and then you sew 2 stitches at the top, and then you attach a label at this point if you'd like to. I'm using glue once again because it's so easy and this is so little, and then you attach it to the lining part. So this is just 2 rows of stitches on the side and on the bottom, and I'm going to pin them together after I centered it the best I could. It didn't turn out centered after I sewed it to the other piece of the lining, but oh well, it's in the inside of the bag. It'll be fine. And now we add the other piece of the lining part, do right sides together, and then you sew up the side. I'm pretty sure when they do centimeters for seam allowance, it's 1.5 centimeters. Again, they didn't mention this, but that equals to about 1/2 inch if you use inches. Okay, so we turn the outside of the bag inside out and we have the lining right side out so that it is right sides together when they're inside. And then you pin, pin, pin. So this is the part at the corners we want to focus on remarking and pinning together. So I'm going to remark where the drawstring is supposed to go, making sure that I leave the correct space. And I sew from that top marking to the corner, to the top, to the corner again, and then back down to the other top marking. And I do that on both sides. And I almost forgot this part, but I had to go back and put clips on to leave a space. So I think they said 5 centimeters to leave a space. I think that's about 2 inches for people who use inches, and that's just to pull the bag through. So make sure that you do that, because otherwise you just close the bag right up. So magically I sewed it up. I didn't show that part, but I sewed everything at the top, and now I'm just pulling the bag through using that opening that we just marked, and it's gonna be so pretty. And then we fold the bag back into itself, so we get the lining in the right spot, and then we pull out all the fabric at the corners. They say to make sure to neaten the corners, and I use my bone folder. You can use other things, just make sure that it's not too sharp that it will poke a hole. I've learned that from experience, but don't use anything too sharp, otherwise it will poke a hole in the corner, and then you will have to sew that up again. But my bone folder works just well, just perfectly. I think there's some specific tools. I just can't remember them off the top of my head for this part. And I want to press this so that I don't see the lining. So you can see me fiddling with the fabric here, so I can see the outside at the top. Then I'm going to press it so it stays like that. And then here I'm going to sew the top stitch. So you sew what you just sewed together, like from the top of the drawstring marking to the next, about 1/8 of an inch from the top. And then you sew the 2 lines to make the channel for the drawstring, which you can mark. I'm using the spots on my machine. I have a little grid there on the right, so I'm just going to use that for the channel markings, but you can use your pen to mark those 2 sewing lines. And I'm going to use ribbon for this project. On my last project, I made the drawstring, and they have instructions for it and a pattern for it. So that's a template. It's not as long as it's supposed to be. Again, that's up to you. They have a suggestion written on the pattern, but this is how you do it. So you fold the fabric in half so that you create a crease in the middle, and then on each side you fold to the crease so that each side has a folded edge, and then you iron that together. This is my preferred way of doing a drawstring. A lot of people do a loop, so they just sew it together and then they put it inside out, and I absolutely hate doing that. Be careful, it's hot. Right there. And then you sew this together after you fold in everything together, and it creates one nice loop, and then you sew on the side that is open. So you do one nice neat stitch like you can see here. All done. Okay, let's put this ribbon on. So this ribbon I've just found, I'm pretty sure it's just from Michael's, and it's almost like a corded ribbon, so it's really thick. It's not like plastic or anything, it is fabric. So this is how you do it. You go in one end and you come out that same end, and then you do the same thing on the other side, and then that way when you pull the sides, it closes. You pull each side, it closes it. This is kind of a tricky way to do a drawstring. Like some people just do one on each side, but I like how easy this is to open and close. So I use a safety pin and I just push it through. This ribbon is thicker than the drawstring, but I kind of like an oversized look when it comes to ribbon. The bigger the better for me. And it is through, and you're going to tie a knot in the end, and then you're going to do the same thing on the other side. Now you can see you pull it together and it cinches up. It still looks like a heart. Overall, I'm really happy with this. You could make the strings a little bit longer. It is enough to just like go up to your elbow, or for a kid to go over their shoulder. But yeah, I'm really happy with this. There's my little pocket. All done. Thanks for watching.